Welcome back, Weezers and Weeboos, to Temperature. Good start. Okay, well, this is an unscripted rambling video, so great. This is a great tone setter. No, welcome back, Weezers and Weeboos, to Television Doge, where today I'm going to be covering Overwatch 2 again. It's been a while, I know. So you might have been led to believe that I had already forgotten about this game after all the work I put into defending it and standing up for it when it first came out and saying, no, let's give it a chance. Then it comes out and I go quiet on it after a couple months. You know, it could seem like I'd already forgotten about it. But no, I've still been playing. It's just that something happened at one point. You see, I mentioned that one of the reasons I was so optimistic about Overwatch 2, despite the fact that its initial offerings were underwhelming to a lot of other people, was that ultimately a lot of what they were doing promised much more consistent content. Even if it's not a whole big bunch of new content, that we would be getting new content, and that new content would be coming in as a steady stream of new stuff that just came at a good pace now. Instead of having to wait ages in between any new content in this game, we could get new stuff fairly regularly. We just couldn't expect necessarily it to be a huge amount. And obviously that's a lot better than the radio silence we've been getting for the past 3 years with basically no new content. Now, of course, since that's so important to what I thought was good about Overwatch 2, I was planning to cover the new content that they would be bringing out for every new competitive season. However, I didn't end up making a video in Season 2. And there's a good reason for that. You see, Season 2 brought us the new tank, Ramatra.
We will have peace at any cost.
That was the bulk of the new content, although it also gave us a new map, Shambali Monastery. Now, I'm not gonna lie, the new content in Season 2 wasn't much of a problem. The problem was that everything else with the game. I'll say it flat out. We are now in Season 3, thankfully, but Season 2 was garbage. I won't lie. And I was worried for a moment because, you know, I had all these high hopes for the game. I thought Season 1 was fine, and I thought that any problems I had with it could be fixed in the next season. And I was looking forward to that next season. And so, obviously, to see that next season come, and for it to be one of the worst months of Overwatch I've ever played, worse than it was in its Overwatch 1 state, was obviously pretty disheartening. So, what went wrong? Well, a lot of things. Probably the biggest one, at least for me personally, although to a lot of other people this was a much less major issue, but maybe it's because I'm at that sort of awkward middle skill level. I mean, I don't know really what rank I am since I don't play enough competitive, but personally my quick play games, I notice a lot of diamond players. Like, almost everyone I run into who has like a blank challenger nameplate for like reaching a certain rank by the end of a competitive season is diamond. So I'm guessing my hidden MMR says I'm diamond. Well, anyway, basically, yeah, because I'm at that weird middle skill level, the matchmaking got broken in Season 2, and that fucked me over. Because essentially every game I'd be getting a mix of complete random mix of, okay, here's this fucking cracked, unstoppable, never miss a shot Sojourn, and you're gonna get on your team a bunch of people who are fresh installs. At least they play like they are. And it's like, Jesus Christ, you know, it didn't really feel very fair. And it wasn't even good when you were on the winning side. Like, I know this sounds like, oh yeah, an obvious downside, but like, I mean this so much. I had games where I won, and I had literally no fun the entire time. Because the whole game, I'm just looking for enemies to kill, but I've got someone on my team who's so cracked that they're getting kills so fast, I literally can't find enemies to fight. And meanwhile, the enemy team's having a horrible time because, of course, they're all getting destroyed by someone who's way above their skill ranking. So when matchmaking gets broken this bad, you can imagine how it can ruin the experience of the game, even if the other new content isn't anything bad. But it wasn't just the matchmaking that was broken, it was also the balance of the game in general. Don't get me wrong, I don't like to say that the balance of Overwatch destroys it that much, because everyone's always got something to complain about with the balance, and I do feel like in some ways, well, there's obviously better and worse balance, and it's not to say that it's not worth it trying to balance the game. I do think it doesn't matter how well balanced the game is, people will always find things to complain about. There will never be, I don't even think we can ever get to a point where a vast majority of the community will agree that a portion of the game was balanced. I'm pretty sure that even if we get the literal most balanced patch of Overwatch possible in the next couple days, there would still be people who would complain about it. So I don't usually like to say, oh, it was bad because of the balance without going more into it. But I think Season 2 was one of the only times where that truly was the case. That's because the meta that had developed in Season 2 wasn't just one of those, oh, guess you have to use this character metas, which is already not that fun, but ultimately most games eventually devolve into something like that if they're competitive. But no, this was worse. We got the one-shot meta, which is just exactly what you think it is by the sound of it. You see, I mentioned before, we had this sort of adjusting period with Overwatch 2. A lot of things changed, and people needed to figure out what was good. And, you know, sometimes that was a bit unintuitive what it was, and it certainly took me a little bit to figure out what it was. I had a feeling for this, but I wasn't sure exactly how to put it into words. And eventually I clicked. I noticed that it felt like supports were much stronger, even though their healing numbers hadn't been increased, and in fact, if anything, they got less ult charge, which you could argue even reduces their healing output. It still felt like healers were extremely powerful in Overwatch 2, provided they could simply survive. Even though surviving was really difficult with healers in Overwatch 2, if you could just survive, you would do so much for your team. And so because of that, I was starting to think, why is it that it feels like that? The healing numbers are the same. Is it because we only have one tank now? But then that one tank has increased health. What's up with this? And this is when I finally realised what it is. Stuns were almost completely removed in Overwatch 2. And without stuns, how do you stop someone you're fighting from running to their supports to get full healed so that you have to disengage from the fight? There isn't many answers you can give, because if there's no stuns, well, you just got to kill them before they can get to their supports. But what if their supports are only a couple steps away? You got to kill them real fast. Or you could do something even better. You could simply kill them with something that kills them so quickly that they don't even get a chance to be healed, even if they're standing right next to their supports. And so here comes the one-shot meta. Do you want to know what was very popular during this time? Tank, Roadhog. Roadhog was triple S tier. Basically, you cannot play any tank besides Roadhog, unless it was a tank that countered Roadhog, i.e. Orisa. Orisa was only good because she countered Roadhog, I would say. I know, maybe I'm wrong about that at top level, I don't know. But that was certainly my experience. People, I feel like, have constantly been overreacting to Orisa. There are some people who are saying she was equally as busted as Hog. And don't get me wrong, she was good, but I can't imagine that. I feel like that's extremely hyperbolic. So yeah, there was a little bit of Sigma sneaking in there every now and then, because Sigma was decent against Hog as well. But for the most part, it was just, you play Hog, or if you really want to, you play someone that counters Hog. In terms of DPS, the meta was that you would use Sojourn, and you get those railgun headshots. Then Sojourn got nerfed, so she couldn't one-shot with the railgun headshots, but she could still do it with Mercy damage boost, so she was still meta, because you just get a Mercy pocket. If anything, that just made Mercy meta, instead of making Sojourn not meta. It also, of course, Widow everywhere, you would see that a lot. Hanzo you wouldn't see quite as much at top level, just because Hanzo's not considered very good at the highest tiers of play, but definitely at the lower to mid tiers, Hanzo was still everywhere and is still an absolute menace. And Junkrat, my god, it should really say something when one of the lowest skill ceiling characters in the game that has almost consistently been a noob stomper character suddenly becomes one of the best DPSs in the game, even at the top levels of play. Yeah, it was just because you had that one-shot combo with Junkrat that made him, and obviously the fact that he could flank a bit more with his, launching himself with explosives into enemy back lines, he became a menace. And so we have this situation where you're usually running either Lucio Kiriko or Mercy Kiriko. Never Lucio Mercy, that's an awful support comp. So yeah, that was your team. Roadhog was your tank. You probably had a Sojourn, and either then, like for the other slot, a Junkrat or a Widowmaker. And for your supports, you would have a Mercy hard pocketing the Sojourn so that she could one-shot people with a, railgun, and a Kiriko to just give people invincibility and teleport around and simply not die because she's got, the smallest hitbox in the game and can climb on walls and teleport and give herself invincibility. So yeah, good luck trying to hit that target. Or you go Lucio, just because he's kind of similar to Kiriko in the fact that, he's just hard to hit. And I've mentioned before, since healing on its own is something that every support can do just feels so powerful. Simply just not dying as a support becomes your #1 priority in Overwatch 2, because that's the hard part. Healing is the easy part, and you don't even have to do it that well to get a lot of effectiveness out of it, a lot of value out of it. So yeah, that was not very fun. You can probably guess it wasn't. And what was even worse was this new tank that just came out, Ramatra. You know, this new content we've been waiting for. Guess what he was like? He was in the fucking dumpster. When he first came out, Ramatra was absolutely useless. He was pathetic. And that was because, ultimately, Ramatra has a bit of a unique playstyle. So, essentially, the way that he works is he's a bit of a mix of everything, and he's not particularly the best at any of it. There's only really one thing that I think really stands out for him, which I'll get to in a second. But let's cover his abilities. So he has a shield, which has 1,000 health, which is pretty strong, but it has a 12-second cooldown, which is also pretty long, and yep, that shield's already gone. It's a lot of health, but it disappears very quickly, so the health almost doesn't matter. Well, as well as that, you get his Nemesis form, which is one of the main things he's known for. You can swap into Nemesis form and start using melee attacks. They are slightly ranged, because it's the wave of energy that actually hits them, not the punches themselves. As you can see, I had increased armor health while I was in Nemesis form, and on top of that, the energy waves pierce through all kind of blocks. So it goes through Genji Deflect, it goes through shields, it goes through any kind of absorbing thing like gravitic, like grasp. I think that's kinetic grasp. I mean, with Sigma, it goes through Diva's defense matrix. The only thing that can negate damage from Ramatra's like Nemesis form is Zarya bubbles. It seems the way that they're coded is that they aren't treated as a barrier. They're treated as just giving the character who like has it one around them invincibility. The reason why I'm inferring that is because I don't remember if this is still in the game now, but at least when Nemesis form was first added, people noticed that people would still do their flinching animations for getting hurt when you punch someone who was Zarya bubbled, but they wouldn't take any damage. So it seems like the energy wave pierces through the bubble, but then when it hits the opponent, it just deals 0 damage to them. Anyway, as well as that in Nemesis form, your right click would change from a shield to being able to block like this, which halves damage coming from the front. Which I know sounds garbage, because I mentioned the Doomfist power block is garbage, but this one is a block that doesn't have a cooldown, and you can enable it and disable it whenever you want. And in fact, it was definitely one of Ramatra's better features. But I really got to get to this. So Ramatra was a massive disappointment when he came out. Not necessarily because he was an unfun character, or that because he was overpowered or anything, because if anything he was underpowered, as I mentioned, but because the main thing it seemed that he was going to be good for is it seemed like they'd finally made a tank whose whole purpose was to deal with flying enemies, which would have been such a godsend. I mean, I've mentioned before, actually maybe I haven't mentioned before in videos, but if I haven't, I literally think that if I could delete one character from Overwatch, any character at all from the game, like, at my choice, just, like, literally, they're gone. Not even, like, oh, their balance changed, or they're reworked to it. No, they're just gone. It would be Pharah. I think that Pharah is just such a boring character to play, so unfun to play against, and ultimately, I just feel like, what is added to the game by having this character in here? You can't even really say that a flying character is added to the game, because Echo's also in the game, and I feel like Echo, while not exactly my favourite character in the game, is at least a bit more fun and a bit more interesting than Pharah. Honestly, as much as there are characters I hate in this game, there are only 2 characters that I think genuinely the game would be better if they just didn't exist, and that's Hanzo and Pharah. Anyway, all that aside, as a tank, every tank in the game is designed to do the most damage at close range and deal much less damage at further ranges, which means that literally all of these tanks here are garbage at dealing with Pharah, Echo, or Mercy, which means as a tank player, it doesn't matter if you're good at every tank in the game. If someone on the enemy team as DPS just decides, I want to play Pharah, oh, hey, Mercy, could you pocket me? And your DPS aren't good at killing them. If you just have bad DPS and you're the tank and you need to carry, Well, tough fucking luck. The opponent's picked Pharah. You literally don't have any tools to counter Pharah, and you're not supposed to be able to have any. The developers very intentionally made it so you don't have any for whatever reason. And so obviously that's really frustrating. The best character in the tank lineup for dealing with Pharah is D.Va, who at the very least can temporarily fly into her face and shoot at her like that. But even still, she only does good damage at close range. It takes a lot of skill as a D.Va to be able to, well, maybe not so much a lone Pharah, but to deal with Mercy-pocketed Pharah in mid-air before you run out of time on your boosters and hit the ground. Considering the tracking you have to do with in mid-air while keeping in mind your timer, yeah, it's really difficult to be able to deal with a Pharah Mercy as D.Va. And if you pick any other tank, it's borderline impossible. In fact, even though I know D.Va's the common choice, I actually prefer to pick Wrecking Ball a lot of the time to deal with Pharah, since, if you didn't know, he is actually able to boot Pharah with his grappling hook fireball momentum like this, even if she's mid-air, which is really helpful. And of course, while he's still best at close range, Wrecking Ball is one of the only tanks with some relatively decent long-range damage, if you're accurate. I believe he's the only hit scan tank as well, and obviously hit scan is good against Pharah. So yeah, so why am I saying all this? Well, Ramattra in the advertising really seemed to be marketed as like, okay, this is the tank to deal with flying enemies. This is the tank to deal with this, because this ability, the whole gimmick is this is an AoE slow that also drags people to the ground, and in all the trailers and all that, he kept using this to rip Mercy's, Echoes, and Pharahs out the sky. And the way that they set things up, it really looked like you could just be like, oh, there's a Pharah up there? Tough fucking look. Yoink. Yoink them to the ground, shoot them, go into Nemesis form, start beating them, and just finally, as a tank, you have a solution to this shit. So you can probably tell something went wrong. Well, let me throw this a little bit further out so you can get a good look at what this looks like from a distance. Now you might notice that that visual doesn't seem to extend very far up. Now I guess maybe I was a naive. I really thought, I actually noticed that and I thought, well, maybe that's just the visual. Maybe the invisible hitbox goes way higher than that. No, that's how high the hitbox goes. So the one ability that you have that's made to counter flyers as Ramattra is an ability which doesn't go high enough to be able to hit anyone who's flying. The ability that is made to counter flying characters does not go high enough to counter flying characters. Do you want to know what's even funnier? It has almost no effect on going sideways. It does slow you down a little bit going sideways, but not that much. Which means since Echo's flight is any direction, it doesn't have to be up. Like, you know, while if I hold up, it goes up. If, like, I wait for this to recharge and I press sideways instead, I can use it to just move sideways and not up. Like, sorry, this. Yeah, I didn't really demonstrate that well, because I kind of went diagonal, but you know what I mean. What will happen is, if you decide to use Echo's fly while inside the thing that's supposed to stop flying characters, you will simply, like, dive out the side, and literally one tap of that Q button is enough to get you out of the AoE. So literally the second that you press the Q button, you'll dive out the side of it and then be able to fly again. Which means that, yeah, Ramattra's main ability that was all supposed to be like, oh yeah, you can counter flyers, turns out it's literally garbage against flyers. In fact, the only thing I thought was, okay, well at least you can put, like, if you throw this in the middle of a Mercy and the person she wants to fly to, you can, like, drag her to the ground and cancel her Guardian Angel. But no, that doesn't even work. Guardian Angel is so strong that in most cases, the Mercy will actually continue to fly to the person through the AoE, even though it's supposed to drag it to the ground, and it won't cancel it. So, yeah, even some cases you are able to fly upwards up to like buildings above where you are as Mercy through Ramattra's AoE that's supposed to drag you to the ground. It's that pathetic. The real only use it has against flying enemies is if you find a Pharah that's dumb enough to get close to the ground towards you, and you know she's about to use Jump Jet to back in the air, you can cancel a jump jet with a well-timed AoE here. A well-timed Ravenous Vortex, that's the name of the ability. But it's not, obviously, as you can guess, very practical, and even if it is practical, once Farahs simply learn, oh, maybe I should just not get close to the ground in the first place, yeah, it goes back to, oh shit, I can't do anything to them. Yeah, great, wonderful. So yeah, this character was a big disappointment, and not to mention that it didn't help that it seemed like the developers themselves didn't understand what they wanted Ramatra to be. They marketed him as something called a tempo tank, and literally everyone, even like, you know, pros in the community were like, the fuck is a tempo tank? See, the biggest thing that's confusing about this isn't that we don't know what tempo means. Obviously, tempo tends to mean the pace of the fight, like, you know, whether we're escalating the fight or de-escalating the fight. But the thing that's weird about that is, that's literally what every tank does. Literally every tank is about controlling the pace of the fight. So what makes a tempo tank but different than every other tank? And honestly, if anything, Ramatra was one of the worst examples of the kind of tank that would be one that would either initiate or de-escalate a fight. Most other tanks in the game are better examples of something like that. So it really felt like the developers themselves didn't understand the character they'd made. And I certainly felt a little bit confused about what they wanted Ramatra to be, unless he was intended to just be the all-rounder. I mean, he's got some health, but he hasn't got as much health as most of the tanks. He does have melee damage with this, but he doesn't have as much melee damage as Reinhardt, so Reinhardt does that job better. He does have this AoE slow, but it's not really very effective, and other slowing abilities are certainly much more effective in this game. He does have a shield, but man, does Reinhardt and Sigma's shields feel a lot better than this shield. And it just kind of felt like, what is this character even trying to be? And in the end, we found some answers. Well, I'm not sure if this is what they intended, but we found some things that Ramatra was good at, but it took a long, long time. So, okay, basically, the two things that Ramatra is really good for is, for one, well, actually, I'd say three things. For one, his primary weapon. Yeah, probably the least talked about thing about Ramatra when he first came out actually ended up being probably the most important thing about him. Because his primary fire is very different to most tanks. You fire, like, nanomachines, which take a long time to reach their target, however they are 100% accurate. They have no spread, they always fire exactly where you point them, and they don't have fall-off damage, and they can headshot. Which means that Ramatra has enormous damage at long range, it's just that it's hard to land shots at long range because of the fact that your shots take so long to reach their target, so they have so much time to dodge. But if you can hard predict where targets are going, or simply hit them when they're not aware that you're there yet, you can get some really good long-range damage with Ramatra, which every other tank in the game is incapable of. Now, before you say, oh, does this mean he is still good against flyers? Remember that you still have some of the slowest moving projectiles in the game, when the main thing that counters Farah and Echo are hit scans, as in people with projectiles that don't have a speed, they just infinitely hit, they move infinitely fast and hit their target instantly. That is kind of the opposite of what Ramatra is. I mean, he's not bad at killing flyers, but I would definitely still pick Ball or Diva if you needed to pick a tank to deal with Farahs or Echoes over Ramatra. But still, this was a good primary fire, and it was very different to what most tanks had to offer, which meant that if you were playing on a sniper map where long sightlines were a problem, and you as a tank simply wanted to poke at long range and engage in these long range fights, despite the fact you're a tank, instead of running into the front line, then yeah, Ramatra was a good pick. The other thing he was good for was something that literally sounds like a meme, but I mean it 100%. The other thing he was good for was this. You would literally just sit here and tank hits for your team and just literally let yourself get, beat the shit out of. And you might be thinking, what? How is that good? I guess maybe you might be blocking hits for your team, but why would it be smart as Ramatra to go out there and just let yourself get hit and just block and face the opponents? Well, there was genuine reason. And it's because if people did hit you, because of the fact they're only dealing half damage to you, they aren't realistically going to be able to burst kill you, especially since you're a tank and you have armor on top of that. Which means that you will die slowly if you don't get any healing. That's the thing. It's a one-shot meta. And if you're playing a character they can't one-shot, that can also reduce incoming damage to make one-shotting even harder, even if there are multiple people hurting you, That means that you give the supports the time they need. You see, most supports in this one-shot meta are going to suffer because they just can't find people to heal until they hit a point where they're already dead, effectively. But now you have a tank who has not only a good amount of health and a damage reduction with armor, but then on top of that, half damage reduction to the front with this. And now you have a great target for all your healing. And I mentioned support ults run this game, and healing generates support ults. So it would be only natural that this was actually unironically a good strategy. Literally just letting yourself get hurt as Ramatra, as long as you were nearby your supports and you weren't in a stupid spot. Just using Nemesis form and just blocking and letting them shoot you was actually a good idea, just to farm support ults, genuinely. The last reason why Ramatra was actually good is, in fairness, he does have one of the strongest ults in the game. This. By the way, I can still punch like this and block. That's Annihilation. So Annihilation is an ultimate which, well, at least when it first released, could last infinitely as long as you kept people inside its damaging aura. Although, if you couldn't keep anyone in it, it would only last 3 seconds. Now, you might notice that wasn't infinite, though. That's because it's obviously been nerfed recently. Now, instead of pausing the timer, it simply massively slows the timer while people are inside it. So, if you get a perfect Annihilation when no one escapes it at any point, it's 20 seconds long instead of 3 seconds. Which at first I thought sounded like an overnerf, but having played Ramatra in this patch, honestly, it's still a really good ultimate. So yeah, all this aside, I know this is a little bit off topic, but we're going to relate back to this Ramatra stuff anyway, and I thought you might want to know what was going on with the new tank if you haven't played Overwatch recently. So, why was Ramatra bad to see in Season 2? Well, as I mentioned, when he first came out, he was fucking garbage, and his uses were very unintuitive and very niche. Now, what changed that made him actually one of the better tanks in the game, in the current state of the game, was not only just general meta changes, but also some seriously well-deserved and very much needed buffs to Ramatra. He used to have less health than he does right now, and more importantly, his Nemesis form used to be basically useless. You see, it doesn't actually do a lot of damage, these attacks. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know how much damage that is? That's 60 damage per punch. Now, you might not have a great idea of how much damage 60 damage is for something that attacks at that speed. Well, let me give you an idea. Here is Anna, a support. A support who can shoot anyone at any range she likes with a hit scan weapon. This weapon does 75 damage per shot, so I can 3-shot these bots. I can also 3-shot Casses, and I can also 3-shot Symmetras. Meanwhile, there's Ramatra, who isn't a hit scan with his Nemesis form, who also can only hit people at extremely close range, and also has to use one of his valuable timed abilities to even go into Nemesis form to attack him this way. And he needs to 4-shot them. If the problem isn't obvious here, yeah, having a tank who has their temporary mode, which is supposed to be their, like, go in and beat the fuck out of everything mode, that doesn't even do as much damage as a support that's a sniper at long range who can't even headshot. That really says something. It really says something. Yeah, the damage is quote-unquote unblockable, but it's not always super important, that fact, and even when it is, it still feels underwhelming. So what changed? Because it's still 60 damage now. Well, it was one very small but very important change. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. This is where I think they started getting their shit together. I said that Season 2 was awful, but I guess I'll skip to the chase. Season 3 started, and although it's just the first week of playing it about, I am happy with Season 3. I've been pleasantly surprised, and I feel like we're getting back on track. And there were some changes before Season 3 came out as a sort of hotfix patch that I saw something they did to Ramatra that was a pleasant surprise for me. I genuinely didn't think they'd have the balls to do something like this, because it's a very different change. It's the kind of thing where you could be playing with fire, but if you do it right, it's going to be the best change possible. You see, when I thought about what they'd do to Nemesis form, I thought they'd just give it a flat damage buff. I didn't think that was actually the best change they could do, because, in fairness, if you buff Nemesis form's damage, what do? If you just make it like an extra 15 damage, so it's 75, well, it still might be really weak. And what do you do from there? If you increase it anymore, it'll start doing more damage than Reinhardt's hammer. And at that point, you have a character who can do more than Reinhardt, but gets to deal more damage than Reinhardt by doing the same thing. And also his damage is unblockable, which doesn't really sound very fair, does it? Not to mention that dealing with unblockable damage, if it actually becomes meta, is going to be really fucking annoying. Because you're just going to get into situations where you know you're dead, but there's nothing you can do about it because the damage is unblockable. So yeah, obviously I felt like this was kind of, you know, a disappointing solution, but I thought it was the solution they were going to go with. But no, they came up with a much better solution, which wasn't something that I hadn't thought about, but it just didn't seem like something they were likely to do. And that is, they added a very small movement speed boost to Nemesis form. You actually run a teensy bit faster in Nemesis form than you do in non-Nemesis form. And that is huge. Like, I know that seems like a very small amount, but that means now that not only do you deal unblockable damage, even if that damage isn't super impressive, you now outrun every character in the game except Tracer and Genji, unless they get some kind of speed boost or movement abilities. And that is huge. It means that because you've got unblockable damage, while also being able to slightly outrun everyone, it means as Ramattra you can actually play aggressively despite your low DPS in Nemesis form, because you can rush in and chase down targets that are trying to do stuff that they really shouldn't be getting away with. And once you start chasing them down, yeah, you might not kill them fast, but if they don't get a support to come to their rescue quick enough, your damage is unblockable, and they can't get out of the way fast enough, which means that you will run them over. So yeah, Ramattra is now a lot better. He's a tank that's actually good at long range, unlike most tanks in the game. He's really good for getting a lot of healing on your supports if you're playing a very healing-heavy comp with your supports, which obviously means they get a lot of ults faster, which, again, support ults run the game, so that's very important. And, as I say, his ultimate is still one of the best ultimates in the game, even after the nerfs. So I'd say right now he's in a very good spot, but when Season 2 first came out, because his Nemesis form was practically useless for anything but blocking, and because his only use was something that was extremely unintuitive, and because of this was before any other buffs that he got, so he felt like he was fragile as a twig, yeah, it really felt like Ramattra was useless. Not to mention that, do you want to know what might be the single best counter to Ramattra in the entire game? It's Roadhog, who was the most meta tank in the meta at the moment. So, like, that was like the auto-pick tank that you had to play if you wanted to do well. So, yeah, it was an awful time in Season 2 because the new content we just got felt useless, because not only was it underwhelming, not only was it kind of the opposite of what it was marketed as, and not only was it, like, not exactly super fun on release, but it was just useless at the time he came out. Again, things are much better now, but that was how it was at first. So anyway, when things got bad enough in Season 2, I finally decided, right, I've had it. And I did stop playing the game for a few weeks, maybe about a month, just because, like, it hit a point where it really wasn't fun anymore. Every game, I was just thinking, God fucking damn it, I'm not enjoying this. I'm so fucking sick of these Roadhogs. I'm so fucking sick of these teams that are stupidly unbalanced. I'm so fucking sick of this blah blah blah. I kept just running into things that just made me mad, and I just wasn't having fun playing the game. And I was very worried because Season 3, of course, is going to be the first season where there isn't a new hero. Because they said that it would only be every other season where they would introduce a new hero. It's going to be the even seasons in which new heroes are introduced, and the odd seasons they're only going to introduce new maps and other miscellaneous content. So obviously, I thought that doesn't bode well, does it? That means that when Season 3 comes out, we're going to have less new content than ever before for any of these seasons we've had so far. And if Season 2 went this badly, I was starting to get worried. However, Season 3 has proven to be a turning point for the game. I genuinely think that Season 3, so far, feels like the best season of the game. And that's a really good sign, because, I mean, this season has the least new content, so if anything, there was a good chance it could have been the worst. But no, while this season has the least new content, I feel like they actually did take this time, not just as an excuse to say, well, no new hero this time, no new content. Instead, they've taken this time to actually take a breather and fix their shit. Which, I mean, I'm glad to see. A lot of balance changes have come in, and they are certainly getting a lot better than they were back in Season 2, where there were some very questionable decisions. Generally, I think the balance changes for Season 3 have been positively received by just about everyone, and the only one that's getting a lot of criticism are the nerfs to Mercy. Mostly because I feel like the reason Mercy was OP in the first place was just for the single reason of damage boosting and pocketing a Sojourn, and that's more a problem with Sojourn than Mercy. And the Mercy nerfs that came in, well, they're not direct nerfs, they're reworks. I think they're interesting, but, well, okay, let me go over them very briefly. Essentially, her healing speed has been nerfed when someone isn't below half health, but when they are below half health, it's slightly increased. She also now no longer regenerates health faster than everyone else, but she does regenerate health when she heals other people to compensate, which is interesting. Those changes I don't think are bad. What I think is bad instead... I didn't mean to press that. What I think is bad instead is the fact that now her Guardian Angel has been nerfed, which is her main form of mobility. It now moves slower, and it has a 2.5 second cooldown instead of a 1.5 second cooldown. Remember how much you need to fly around as Mercy before you say that sounds like nothing. Because as Mercy, your only defense from being murdered is simply the fact that you are extremely hard to shoot and you can move around stupidly quickly. And now, the one ability you have to do that can only be used about half as much and also doesn't even move as fast as it used to, which is an enormous nerf to Mercy. I think this is the only real bad change in Season 3, though, and even then, I don't even necessarily think the interesting reworks to how her health regeneration works and healing works are bad. Well, actually, I take that back. I don't like the fact that she heals faster when people are lower health now, because I feel like it just adds more to that frustration when you catch someone who's about to die and then their Mercy just flies to them and you're just like, oh my god, you should have died there. It's even worse now that she heals faster when they're low health and slower when they're high health. But I do like the change of getting healing from healing other people rather than getting healing just for simply not getting hit. Anyway, that aside, a lot of the other changes have been very positive. Nerfs to Sojourn, nerfs to Ramatra, but in the right places, and more importantly, Roadhog finally fucking dumpstered. Really, they actually came down on him with the nerf hammer pretty hard, and I'm not complaining. This is what I wanted. We've been calling for Roadhog nerfs for so goddamn long, and it felt like they would just never happen. It really always felt like, to me, the devs must have decided at this point that despite how obviously unhealthy it is for the game, they're just going to simply write it in stone that no, it is simply a part of Roadhog's character that he should always be able to one-shot. Well, say goodbye to that. Yep, you saw that. You can no longer hook one-shot even squishies with Roadhog. Can't do it. So, I need to clear up some confusion. First of all, does this mean Roadhog is a useless character now? Well, you might be surprised to hear this, considering how pathetic I probably just made him look. But no, don't get me wrong, he's far from meta. He's now not exactly a strong tank, but he's genuinely not even one of the worst tanks in the game, I would say, right now. There are definitely tanks that are worse off than Roadhog at the moment. He's still a viable pick, just no longer an auto-win dummy, like, easy pick. But still, his damage when you're up close is still insane. They actually didn't nerf his damage at all, technically. I'll get to that in a second. Oh wow, I'm bad, I guess. let me try that again. They don't nerf his damage at all. There we go. He can still quote-unquote one-shot, just not with the hook. So, okay, what's going on? Essentially, it used to be that when the hook landed on someone, it would deal 50 flat damage to them before you even did your gunshot. And when it pulled them in, it would pull them in pretty close to you. Now, it doesn't pull them in as close. There's a bit more of a distance between you when it pulls you in. And it only does 10 flat damage, which makes the one-shot harder to perform. Now, technically, you can still one-shot squishies, but this is a big technically. I'm going to explain in a second, because at first this might look like I really did a normal one-shot, and that, wow, that's an unescapable combo, right? Never mind, I'm not good enough. I'm simply not good enough at the video game. Well, I guess I'll try one more time. Oh, maybe you can't even do it. I think I've seen some clips, so I think you can do it. So yeah, you can kind of do a pseudo one-shot, where you grab someone, and... Nah, that was way too early. That one I don't have an excuse for. My god. What can I say? I'm garbage at Roadhog. Yeah, okay, that's a good one. Yeah, so basically, if you're wondering what's going on here, essentially, all I'm doing is walking forward as I hook, and then firing just a little bit late. And then you can still get the one-shot. So you're probably thinking, oh shit, so Roadhog's still broken? Well, not really. You see, here's the thing. You have to wait for the enemy to be out of stun to be able to wait that long to fire your gun. Now, while they're still probably going to be standing in front of you because they have so little time to do anything in this time window, it does mean anyone who has an ability that's just an instant get out of jail free for something like the hook one-shot is no longer able to be killed by the hook one-shot. Not to mention just generally hard to hit or fast moving characters probably won't get one-shot either. You see, for example, if I went to hook a Moira like this, the second I step forward far enough that I can one-shot them, they probably just use Fade and don't die. And you can see, even with Soldier 76, probably one of the best targets for this one-shot, you really have to get it in good to be able to actually get the one-shot. And what are the chances that the soldier doesn't just snap his neck around so he's facing the back of you? In which case, a lot of your bullets probably won't hit the head, they'll probably hit his shoulders instead. Which makes it even harder to get the one-shot. So yeah. At the very least, to compensate a bit, they decided to buff Roadhog's whole hog a bit by making it last longer and making it recharge faster, which makes its ultimate genuinely really powerful now. I do like how Roadhog's ult is genuinely a powerful ult now instead of just being a joke. Anyway, so this is all really good news, but I think I gotta get to it right now. Let's get to the real exciting stuff. Yep, you're seeing that right. So again, remember, they have changed the health values of all tanks in this update in modes where there are multiple tanks, which includes the practice range. So 550 isn't Wrecking Ball's health now, they didn't nerf his health. That's just that, you know, he has reduced health when he's in a mode that allows multiple tanks. If you're in roll queue where there's only one tank, he'll be back up to his usual 700. More importantly though, you might notice that blue section of the health bar. Oh, that's real, baby. So now, Wrecking Ball has 250 shield health, the health that regenerates on its own, even if you don't have supports helping you, and it regenerates at 30 HP per second, which is pretty fast. I think it's double the speed of the support passive regeneration, if I remember correctly, which is, you know, pretty good. This is really good for Wrecking Ball, because already Wrecking Ball is a relatively independent tank with a very hit-and-run playstyle. So, naturally, you're going to need a lot of moments of going in, fucking people up, oh, I'm hurt, go away, get healed. But the main problem with Ball is that you have to find multiple health packs, and while you have the mobility to find them, yeah, it's not exactly convenient to have to stop between every fight and go looking for every health pack in the map to get healed, unless you can go back to one of your supports, which isn't always an option since, you know, you're playing Wrecking Ball. Personally, I've usually found that I'm able to get back to supports fast enough, but that might just be because at the skill level I'm playing at, people don't play well enough to punish me. And maybe if I was playing against more skillful players, they would be able to punish me severely for constantly trying to go back to my supports instead of simply just looking for health packs. However, now, a good chunk of my health, like a third of it, just regenerates on its own. No help from supports needed, which is enormous. Not to mention, this is also the first character now in Overwatch that gets to have shield health and armor simultaneously, which is a great combo because it means once your shield health is broken, you also start taking reduced damage thanks to the armor, a 30% reduction, which means that on top of that, you're going to get more time to react once your shield health is gone, especially because you get a sound effect, even though it's not super noticeable when your shield health is depleted. It's going to be a great sort of indicator to players that this is your time to get out as Ball, because your like regenerating health has just disappeared. This Wrecking Ball buff is great, and that's not even the only one. In fairness, that's the only significant one, but the other one is still pretty good. Minefield got buffed, thank God. So, Minefield, I always said was a sort of underrated ult before. I do think that it's one of the weaker ults in the game overall, but a lot of people seem to treat it like it's one of the worst, and I think that's far from true. It's just very hard to use. But in fairness, in Overwatch 2, I have found that it's been garbage consistently, and I kind of coped and thought, I just need to adjust, I just need to get good, because, you know, we were still in that adjusting phase to the differences in Overwatch 2, and I'm like, I got to use Minefield so effectively in Overwatch 1, I'm sure that it will also work in Overwatch 2. Wrecking Ball just seems so good in Overwatch 2, like, in theory, surely, like, I'm just not doing this right, and I kept thinking, surely this is just, I need to be good at the game, but ultimately, no, Minefield was garbage. Yeah, in Overwatch 2, it really was. Not only are there less people around, which means that people are kind of generally like less cramped in small spaces, which means that you get less value off of minefields. But on top of that, without stuns and without so many like CC effects, it's really hard to force people into the minefields, into situations where they can't escape them. Which you could do a lot more easily in Overwatch 1. That combined with the fact that the mines could easily be destroyed just by shooting them, and the mines took a full second and a half to arm, meant that oftentimes all that would happen is you'd minefield, you'd pile drive to try and keep them in the mines, but then they would just walk out of them before they armed. Or even if they had no movement abilities and you hit them perfectly right in the center of the minefield and you use pile driver to stop them escaping, usually they get hit by like one mine on the edge and then walk out the rest of it completely fine. And then usually they wouldn't need to really worry about walking near the minefield from then on, so yeah, no luck there. The other thing that I often liked doing with Minefield was I used to love, especially in Overwatch 1, dropping minefields behind opponents, like way behind them, on purpose, and then running back to my team and initiating a push with them so that their entire escape route is covered in mines, so they're essentially screwed no matter what. So I do a minefield that seems useless at first, and then they realise, oh fuck, wait, they've cut off my exit. However, unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work really in Overwatch 2, and in fairness, this one I don't even know what's up. I don't know if it's just simply a fact that I'm not getting many people working with me, but I've done this so much in Overwatch 2, and I swear it only works like... It used to work like 80% of the time, and now it feels like it works like 10% of the time. It seems like I very rarely can get my team to push with me when I try and set up a play like that. So yeah, Minefield has felt awful in Overwatch 2, truth be told. So this change has been really good. It may only be half a second, but my god, I've already noticed how much more Minefield kills I'm getting with that. I absolutely do approve of this change. So yeah, the ball meta is finally here. You might not be seeing that many balls on ladder at the moment, because Ball is, you know, a very high skill ceiling character that not a lot of people play. But I still fully believe that this is probably the time for him to shine, considering I am seeing a lot of higher ranked players saying, if anything, this is terrifying, and one of the only other complaints I've seen is people saying that Ball has been overbuffed this patch, which I'm certainly not going to complain about as a fellow Ball enjoyer. I mean, in fairness, come on, he's one of the highest skill ceiling characters in the game. I think he deserves to be a little strong every now and then. Nah, anyway, but seriously, I genuinely think this is finally going to be the time for Ball to shine. I know I kind of was... It probably sounded a little bit like I was on that copium at first with the first couple seasons. Because Season 1, I was saying Ball should be broken, but unfortunately Sombra's around and they hard counter Ball. And D.Va's broken right now, and D.Va kind of does the same job as Ball. And, you know, it's like, you know, then D.Va gets nerfed. By the way, D.Va's still good, just got to throw that in there. But she's just not broken anymore. D.Va got nerfed, and then Sombra got nerfed into the ground to the point where she's one of the worst characters in the game now. And I thought, okay, time for Wrecking Ball to shine in Overwatch Season 2. And then he felt bad in Season 2 too. In fact, if anything, he felt worse to me. And I was like, what the fuck? What's wrong? And obviously it's the fact that it's the one-shot meta. And the whole thing with Ball is, of course, being able to dive in and dive out. But it's really hard to dive out when everyone on the enemy team is designed to be able to do so much damage that they can kill you abruptly in the space of half a second, in which time you don't have the time to react and escape before they can kill you. Now, in fairness, that being said, it was also a bit of a skill issue, because I have heard that while not many people were able to, some of the more experienced Ball players were able to make Ball work in Season 2. You just didn't hear much about it because not many people were playing him, because it was very hard to play Ball during that time because of how abruptly you would die and how safe you'd have to play it. But if you really were cracked at Ball, you could still make him work, and it wasn't even, well, I shouldn't even phrase it like that, not even you could still make him work, he was one of the strongest picks in the game. You just had to really meet a high threshold of skill to be able to pull it off. And it feels like Season 3, now finally everything's falling into place. The one-shot meta, I wouldn't go as far as to say is dead, but it's certainly much better than it used to be. It's no longer just everyone's playing Widow, Sojourn, Junkrat. As well as that, there's not really any Sombra around to completely cancel you. Doomfist got nerfed, who is another character who's really annoying to deal with as Ball. It kind of feels like this is just the perfect moment if you're a Ball player to absolutely run in there and, yeah, fuck shit up. I mean, the only other character I could see messing with this is Winston, because Winston's obviously consistently been good in Overwatch 2. The only time he wasn't good was Season 2, because Hog hard counters Winston, and Hog was everywhere in Season 2, so you couldn't really play Winston into Hog that often. Even still, you occasionally saw Winstons, and if they were good Winstons, they could really do a lot with him. But Yeah, the only thing I could see is that Winston might fuck up ball. I'm not sure what the consensus is on whether Winston counters ball, but I feel like he is kind of a soft counter to ball in a very unintuitive way. Not that in the 1v1 the Winston beats you, but more that the Winston's a fucking nuisance to deal with as ball, because he can bonk you into different directions you didn't intend using his like leap knockback to mess up your like setups for rolling around. His electricity cannon is really hard to avoid damage, even if it isn't very much burst damage, and it's perfect for clearing out mines. And as well as that, he's got a big hitbox, which usually characters like don't like get a lot of extra damage off of, but since Wrecking Ball is already pretty precise and doesn't have a very wide spread, he doesn't get much extra damage on Winston, and Winston gets a lot of health. So it kind of feels like as Wrecking Ball, Winston often blocks your opportunities stronger than most tanks. So I guess the only way I could see Wrecking Ball falling off this season is if Wrecking Ball does struggle against Winston, and Winston is meta, and Winston does a similar job to Wrecking Ball in being a dive tank that doesn't do the highest damage numbers, but is good in getting to the enemy backline and getting back out without dying. But yeah, as well as that, I think that Anna, we see Anna creeping into the meta again, which has always been one of those things where it feels like it could happen at any moment, but we're not sure yet. Like, Anna's always been a consistently decent pick, but she hasn't really been meta, mostly just because obviously the anti-nades are the main thing that keep Anna meta, and the anti-nades could always be countered by Kiriko Suzu, and Kiriko's been consistently meta. But if Anna creeps more into the meta, that's even better for Ball, because I would say Anna's the best support in the game for Ball. There might be some people who say Lucio. I'm not sure if Lucio's speed boost is considered super useful with Ball. I know that the speed you can get with it is absolutely insane, but it can be too insane. Like, or ironically, you can just be going so fast that you can't goddamn control yourself. Now, I still consider Lucio a strong support to run with Ball, but definitely I think Anna's better, just because you get these long sight lines, he can provide enough healing to heal him despite his high health bar, and it means that she can heal you from a good distance. She doesn't have to follow you around like a Moira would, which is why Moira isn't so good with Ball, because you move around so fast as Ball, but the Moira has to chase you to be able to heal you, because she can only heal people right in her face. Trying out the Mercy Ball combo was funny. I don't recommend it, I'll say that much, but I did think I'd try it out and see if it was good with one of my friends who also plays Ball. I was the Mercy. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. Oh yes, and I just realized I hadn't even mentioned yet Brigitte. Okay.
Breaking me down just builds me up.
So, you might be curious. If you didn't know, Brigitte has been considered pretty widely by the community as the single worst support in the game for a while now in Overwatch 2. And that's not my opinion, as I've mentioned. If you remember my supports video, I ranked her near the middle, and even then I struggled ranking her 5th. I thought it was really tight between her and Anna for the 5th and 4th spot. But, thingy, that aside, it would seem even ranking her 5th that I'm overrating her compared to the rest of the community who didn't like her. And maybe I am, because again, I am like a Brig secondary in terms of support. I play Anna most, but then Brig second most. In Overwatch 2, I kind of already explained my feelings about Brig. I guess I don't need to go over them again. But I feel like part of the reason that Brig wasn't doing so well was mostly because of this one-shot meta. Because, again, your main method of defense as Brig is the shield. And if you're playing in a meta where the whole thing is burst damage, this shield ain't going to do shit. It's going to blow up in half a second, and then you're going to be left with no mobility and one little to defend yourself with, which is not a lot. But now that we're in a bit more of a calm meta, Brig's creeping back in. There's not really a consensus yet on whether Brig is good yet. A lot of people seem to think sort of maybe she's just okay now. But I think we might even start to be creeping into good territory with Brig now. Her shield got a bit of a health buff, as you can see, to 300, which I wasn't sure if that would matter much, but I was surprised. Literally, the second this buff came in, I was having games against Brigs where I was noticing as DPS that I would take fights with the Brig that I know I should win, and I would lose them by the tiniest amount, and I'm thinking, wow, that 50 health mattered way more than I thought. I'm consistently losing fights to Brigs in 1v1 situations, and I'm always losing them by less than 50 health, which is the amount of buff that the shield got. So clearly, this is actually fucking with my game sense and has actually been, like, a significant buff. And sure enough, I started playing Brig and I noticed, wow, my shield is saving my life a lot more than it used to. Just that 50 extra health was a massive change for Brig. Not to mention, she just got buffed again So that, first of all, because the devs have realized that Rally has been less effective in Overwatch 2, thanks to the burst damage stuff and how Rally's sort of health providing is gradual, they made it so that Rally charges faster, but on top of that, they've made it so that Brigida's healing is more effective. When she throws a repair pack, instead of healing 110 health over 2 seconds, it now heals 25 health instantly and then 100 over the next 2 seconds. So that's overall a 15 buff in healing per heal pack, which obviously adds up to 45 across all 3 heal packs. And of course, it's even better because you get 25 instant healing now, instead of having no instant healing and only healing over time. Which means it's a little bit more feasible to try and throw multiple packs at someone to keep them alive in a panic situation as Brig, which is nice. I'm generally getting to a point where it feels like Brig feels pretty good. You just kind of have to be a Brig player. You have to have someone who knows how to play Brig, and that's good to see, especially because, while I don't think most people were calling Brig the worst character in the game, I do remember seeing this thing where someone on, like, the Overwatch Reddit had compiled, like, a bunch of tier lists, all from, like, you know, respected players, looking at, like, averaging out how people ranked every single character in the game. And while basically no one considered Brig the worst character in the game, so many people considered her like second worst or third worst that when they averaged out all the results, Brig was considered the worst character in the game in this average of everyone's tier lists. So I'm glad that we're now sort of seeing a resurgence of her. Since I mentioned, she was one of my most played supports, and I really hope that she stays good. So yeah, genuinely, I think we're just in a pretty good state right now. But I'm not going to say that we're blind to any issues that might come up that are in the game right now. Oh yeah, I didn't even mention Junker Queen. Okay, right, sorry, I was about to get to the problems with Season 3, which there aren't that many, but Junker Queen. Holy, I did not even mention Junker Queen. So Junker Queen got a buff. They now have 450 health, but that was the most recent buff. There was another buff before that came right at the end of Season 2, and it was good. So first of all, the knife now deals bleed damage, and while its on-impact damage is reduced, its bleed damage is increased, which overall leads to more damage when it lands. And of course, since it's bleed damage now, it also means you get self-healing. It used to be that you only got bleed damage with the knife if you hit someone on the way back, which obviously was kind of dumb. Like, obviously you should get bleed damage for hitting someone directly with a knife. As well as that, they did a cool buff to her axe. So it still has an 8-second cooldown to be used again. However, if you hit someone with it, it drops to 6. And if you hit 2 people with it, it drops to 4, like you saw there. And if you hit 3 people with it, it drops to 2. And if somehow you manage to hit 4 or more people with one axe, you instantly get it back. That's a cool mechanic, and we haven't seen anything like that in the game at all until now. And that's something that must have been so easy to make for them to quickly do it in just one tiny little bounce patch. But it's just so cool to see in the game, considering we've never seen it before. I'm so glad to see this. It's a really cool addition. So yeah, Junker Queen is now in a spot where... Oh yeah, and I think her... I'm trying to remember if her primary fire got buffed. Something else got buffed. I must admit, I don't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, overall, Junker Queen now feels like a viable tank pick. Don't get me wrong, she's not meta, but even just being a viable tank is so good, considering that, you know, this, I said before, I think this is generally a tank that no one dislikes playing against and no one dislikes playing as. That the general consensus has been from the whole community, this is just a fun character. And that is a good sign. I mean, how many times can you think that a new character has come out in Overwatch and you don't see people saying, God, I hate dealing with this character? There's always people who like the character, but there's always someone who's like, Jesus Christ, I hate dealing with this character. I hate playing against this character. Like, I mean, I'm gonna say that's half true for me, even. Like, there's a whole bunch of characters on this list which I like playing as, or I don't have a problem with, but I still think, fuck, I hate dealing with them. And I feel like Junker Queen is literally the only character I can think of off the top of my head, which is both, oh, I don't mind dealing with that character, they're kind of fun to play against, and also, holy shit, I want to play this character, they're so fun. So having a character like that finally be a viable pick without you throwing the game is so good. Okay, enough positivity. Now for the negativity. But I'm not going to go too hard. So there are 2 big problems I can think of with the game right now. That being, well, 2 characters really. I guess let's talk about Sombra first.
In my world, there are no secrets.
So... I've said before, I'm kind of in a weird spot with Sombra. I'm tentatively a Sombra fan. You see, I really liked playing Sombra back on console ages ago, but I feel like ever since I came to PC and saw what they did to Sombra over the years, I'm like, what the fuck have they done to my character? And I understand that's because she was apparently OP at Overwatch level play when she was new, but the more I play with Sombra, the more I'm like, I'm disappointed with what they did with this character. This is a cool idea, and I feel like they keep steering her into the ground. And yet, they've done it again. They've steered Sombra into the ground. It seems like the developers just simply can't wrestle with the fact that what they inherently seem to want to make Sombra is something that can never be allowed to be good because it will kill the game. What I want Sombra to be is someone who is almost like a frail and sort of sneaky version of a tank, which might sound like a weird thing to say, but I don't mean a tank in terms of health. I mean a tank in terms of what a tank really does in this game. They initiate fights, and they coordinate with their team and all that. I can see Sombra as a DPS who also acts like a fight initiator, by going in with invisibility, hacking enemies to create a good opportunity for the team to go in, and obviously going in on them, while using her escape tool to get out. And you can see the bones of something like that in her kit already, which is obviously that's why I want them to take her. I want them to take her in this direction. There. But that is not where she's being taken right now. Where she's being taken is this idea that she's an assassin, which sounds really cool on paper, but really fucking sucks in practice. The idea being that no, you're not creating opportunity for your team to go in. You're not being sneaky and starting team fights. No, you just sneak off, find someone who's alone and just go, haha, I challenge you to an epic DPS one-on-one. Haha, you're dead. This is not fun. Because for the person who's getting jumped, it's just, okay, I'm minding my own business. Oh, I can't use my abilities. Oh, I'm dead. And what's the counterplay to that? I'm invisible. What can they do about that? You know, there's no counterplay. It just fucking sucks. It's just, oh, guess that's how it works. Well, fuck. In the meantime, though, we've got this other problem of, from the Sombra's perspective, it fucking sucks, because, well, it's not very interesting. Frankly, just to put it frankly, it's not very fun playing this. It's just like, okay, so I do the hack and I do the shoot, and then I do the hack and then I do the shoot, and I do the hack and I do the shoot, and I don't have to have any skill to avoid getting caught because I just turn invisible. I'm fully fucking invisible. What are they supposed to do? It's not really a very fun playstyle. Again, this is why I'm tentatively like a fan of Sombra, because I really like what Sombra feels like she should be to me. This like disabling opponents to enable your team to go in and strategically picking out the people who you need to like focus your attention on and using your escape tool to get around. But the fact that they instead keep trying to steer her to this, like, no, you go for these one-on-one assassin kills out of nowhere, makes her constantly bad. And I know you're thinking, why is she bad if she's an assassin who can one-on-one people? Well, naturally, something like that can never be allowed to be good. If it's allowed to be good, then everyone hates it. This is why everyone hates Sombra, because what I want Sombra to be is not what Sombra's being, and what they seem to want to make Sombra to be is something that literally everyone hates. So yeah, basically, I think that they keep nerfing her because they simply can't have something like this in the game, but they still insist on having it for some reason. So yeah, Sombra's at a point right now where it's hard to kill anyone with Sombra. She got buffed this patch a slight amount, but she's still considered probably one of the worst characters in the game at the moment. Yeah, which is quite a jump from what it was before when she was considered one of the best in the game. That's because they fucking nuked her with nerfs. They absolutely obliterated her. You know, it's funny, I don't know if I said it in the video, because obviously I said a lot of stuff in the video was a bit more, like, you know, unscripted and rambly, but I think I might have mentioned that I felt that I was worried the developers might focus too much on nerfing her new tools, which actually made her cool and fun, and not nerfing the inherent problem we already had with Sombra, which I already covered in the past, but just as a recap, in short, I think the thing that sucks about Sombra is that your invisibility and teleportation as escape tools are both infinite duration and work over infinite distances. This is fucking stupid. Listen, I like the idea of being able to turn invisible and run around faster than everyone temporarily. I like the idea of being able to teleport to get out of situations a certain distance or within a certain time frame before I lose my opportunity. I don't like just having the ability to infinitely decide, oh, I should have died in this fight? Guess I'll just press E and decide I shouldn't have been allowed to die in that fight. It's like, what the fuck? Like, that's unfun for me because I never get punished and I have to have garbage damage to be balanced for that. And it's unfun for the opponent because they fucking earned that kill, and I just press E and now they don't earn it. It's like, what? No, that's fucking stupid. So yeah, this is just my frustration with Sombra. I really, really hope they'll finally come to their senses and realize infinite invisibility is simply not a good mechanic. Temporary invisibility, maybe. Temporary invisibility, maybe temporary teleportation or range-limited teleportation. But infinite range teleportation plus permanent invisibility is fucking stupid. And it really needs to change. So yeah, Sombra's in a bad spot. I really hope they start steering her in the right direction soon. Oh yeah, I didn't even say how they nerfed her. Well, basically, they made it so her hack damage increase was significantly reduced so she couldn't kill people as fast. And while this did make her more balanced, they made her more balanced by making her garbage. And I feel like they're just going to let her stay like that until they figure out what they want to do with her. And I really hope they realize sooner than later that what they seem to want to do with this whole assassin playstyle just is not going to work. Well, anyway, the other negative thing is Kiriko. You might be surprised to hear this, because when Kiriko first came out, I seem to have a pretty glowing opinion of her. I should say she was very fun, and, you know, I thought she was a great addition to the game. Well, okay. I kind of hate that I have to say this now, because I feel like I meant everything I said back then, and I don't even think anything I said back then is wrong. It's more just there was one thing that seemed so insignificant when she was new, but the longer I played, the more I realized, oh my god, this is actually huge, and I hate the fact it's huge, because it's bad. That being, well, actually, I'll say two things. It feels like there are two things about Kiriko I didn't like, and literally everything else about her I liked. But the two things I didn't like is, one, it feels like the main way that Kiriko survives is really fucking annoying. Like, first of all, she has basically the I don't know, like, the actual hitboxes, but in my experience, Kiriko is the single hardest character in the entire game to shoot. I sometimes struggle to shoot even standing still Kiriko's, even though other shots I'm completely fine with. Any other character I probably have a decent chance with. Kiriko, for whatever reason, I seem to miss everything. Not to mention there was the whole fiasco with her hand being able to block her head hitbox temporarily earlier in the game, and in fact she can still do that sort of, but it's not as common now. So yeah, a short stature compared with like a thin like hitbox combined with the fact that she can wall climb, combined with the fact that she can teleport, which gives invincibility frames, combined with the fact she can give herself invincibility on top of that at will, which also provides her some kind of healing, combined with the fact she has the support passive to regenerate health. Yeah, when you're against a Kiriko, it's really fucking annoying dealing with her, because it's just like you chase her forever and you feel like you never land a goddamn shot, and all she's doing is just 80, 80, 80, jump, 80, 80, 80. Oh, you actually landed a shot? Tough fucking luck, I'm teleporting out of here. You know, it's just like so annoying to deal with. And I thought, okay, I'm complaining about this, but eventually I'll just get good and start landing these shots, and, you know, I'll stop complaining about this. That's why I didn't really say much about it before, because I just thought it's probably just a skill issue. But what can I say? It's months into the game now, and it's still a problem. I still find myself struggling way more to hit shots on Kiriko compared to any other character in the game, and it feels like 90% of Kiriko's survivability just comes from the fact that her hitbox is non-existent. And I think the moment where I really realized, wow, this really is a problem, is when I started even seeing, like, really good players, like, with really fucking good aim, also complaining about how fucking hard it is to hit this character. So, I feel like it is a skill issue, yes, technically. But if it's a skill issue that even the most skillful players are complaining about, maybe it could be toned down a bit. The other problem I have with Kiriko is her healing. I think I did mention this when I first talked about her, but one of the only downsides I thought about Kiriko is I think this method of healing is boring. I just hold right-click on people. Even Mercy, you might think, isn't this not like that different to Mercy's healing? You just hold, like, your beam on someone. And don't get me wrong, Mercy doesn't have the most exciting healing in the game. But even the beam has a lot of nuance to it. First of all, in that you can have it connect through walls, but only for a limited amount of time, which means that you can kind of heal someone from cover temporarily if you kind of do dances in between, like, wall and not wall. But then with Kiriko, it's just look in the general direction of someone and hold right-click. And it doesn't even feel as simple, not simple, as satisfying as with the beam, because with the beam you can just click once and hold it down. With this, I have to click, hold, release, click, hold, release, click, hold, release. I know it sounds like a miniature thing, but it just makes the healing just feels unsatisfying, and it's not very fun to do because there's basically no skill requirement to this. Well, I say that I still find Kirikos who miss their fucking healing when it auto aims. Sorry, I had to throw that out there. That's been happening a lot recently, and that just irks me. It's like, my god, you have a character who auto-aims their healing and you still miss healing. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, this healing just doesn't feel very fun to do. I mean, if you're already getting bored watching this, you probably get the point. But yeah, this sounds like such a small complaint. Oh, her healing's boring, but hey, her Suzu's cool, and her teleportation's cool, and her wall climbing's cool, and her kunais are cool, and her ultimate's really cool, so like, what's the problem? But the thing is, as Kiriko, you're spending 90% of your time playing Kiriko just healing. Even though this is one thing about her kit, which is much more expansive than just the healing, this is what you're going to be doing 90% of the time you're playing Kiriko, and does this look fun? It's not very fun. And it's such a shame because, as I say, I feel like the rest of her kit is very fun. And I wish this wasn't the case, but it really feels like Kiriko is the single closest character you can get to just fucking spectating a match of Overwatch. It feels like you just watch other people have fun as Kiriko and hold right-click on them to make sure they don't die and can keep having fun. And you just kind of sit there like, yep, I'm sure having fun by not participating in the game. Oh wait, someone noticed I'm a character that exists. Yep, better dip. Okay, back to spectator mode. Yeah. Now, again, I'm not going to go so hard on Kiriko, because, again, I really feel like it's only those two things that are a problem. And she has so much else going for her that I wouldn't even be complaining about this if it weren't for the fact that these two things are two things inherent to her, that it's like not one ability you only use sometimes. It's things that you're doing all the time with Kiriko, and things you have to deal with all the time playing against Kiriko. That's what makes it so it's not so fun. I also feel like I might have been a bit too nice on Kiriko when she first came out, just because I was so deprived of new supports. Of course, as someone who now probably plays about as much tank as support, but before was heavily a support main, you know, it made sense that, like, I was excited for new support, and with how few supports we get in this game, I was so excited just to have any kind of new character to play in the role. So I feel like I might have let that cloud my judgment a bit with Kiriko. Anyway, that being said, Season 3 is looking to be quite good. In fact, I've seen a lot of high-level players making their first tier list now they've had a week to experience the game, and a lot of them seem to be saying this may be one of the single most well-balanced patches we've had in a while, which is good news, and hopefully a sign that things are getting back on track. I really do believe that Overwatch 2 is going to kind of be a comeback story, that while I'm not going to completely ignore that the launch has been, you know, rocky. I mean, I think the first season was fine, but of course that was only because I already had realistic expectations. If you didn't know the situation going down with Overwatch in between Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2, then you wouldn't have been aware of all the trouble they've had making Overwatch 2, and you wouldn't have known that, like, you shouldn't have expected, like, a whole fucking overhaul of the game for the second game. However, I do think that we can get to that point where it's everything people wanted in the first season. Once we get, like, you know, a few months into the game, once they get into their stride, I am really excited to see Season 4. Like, maybe I'll eat my words, maybe I'll watch this back and cringe, but I am excited for Season 4, and I feel like Season 4 might be the best season we get for a while, because Season 4 is going to be the first season, besides the launch of the game, where we get a new support, and damn, do we need new supports. And considering how much good of a jumping off point we have now in Season 3, where Season 3 just feels like the meta is so healthy. The first time since the release of this game that it felt like the meta is so healthy. Like, I think the meta was relatively healthy at the start of it in Season 1, but certainly not all the way there. Sojourn was still dominant, Zarya was still dominant, and D.Va was still dominant right at the start. But yeah, I just cannot wait. Not to mention that we're going to get much more frequent updates now if we do have any balance concerns. It's now going to be that if we do have any seriously needed, like, balance concerns seriously in need of being addressing, that they now have a hotfix system implemented into the game that allows them to patch things within, like, a week of them, like, knowing, okay, this is a problem, here's the new balance changes, here's the new patch. Real quick, snap, like that. And this has been a great change to the game. And apparently this was the reason they were a bit slow to react at the start of the game's life, is because the system wasn't quite ready and they were trying to set it up and get it working, and it wasn't quite working how they expected. But now it is working as intended, and we've seen much more frequent updates, and whenever things have gone wrong, we've seen responses, and they've been relatively succinct. And while they weren't the best responses at first, as I say, as we get a trend away from the start of Season 2 to the start of Season 3, they've progressively gotten better and better. So hopefully they're finally fucking learning from their mistakes, and hopefully we're going to see that I'm going to have some good things to say about Season 4. But yeah, so far I've had positive impressions of Season 3, and I'm not sad that I've stuck with this game. I do think that it's really on the up and up. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.